just to give you a bit of a background on Paul's, he studied at the École Normale Supérieure with a PhD thesis on football in Turin between 1930 and 1960. The centennial book from 2000 to 2004, and also is a lecturer in history in Besançon. And Stefan van Lok, he's the spokesperson of the Belgian national team for the men's and the women's side.
Sport journalist at Gazeta Sporturilor is the biggest sports newspaper in Romania, and yes, I wrote a few things about the let's say the Romanian national team in that period. And the Conte Verde is let's say a well-known story in Romania. And we have also a journalist in Romania who died, I think, 20 years ago. His name was Ioan Chirilă, and he wrote a book. It's named "We Also Went on Conte Verde." So the Conte Verde is in the name of the book, and it tells the story of the trip. So the man who organized everything was a lawyer. His name was Octav Luchide. So this guy, Octav Luchide, organized everything because it was very hard for a team from Romania to go to Uruguay. So it was his idea to take the train to Genoa and to take the boat from Genoa with other European teams to Uruguay. The king of Romania from that time, Carol II, selected a few players, because one of the best players of that decade, he was Ștefan Dobai. The players were amateurs, you know, and a lot of them were working, you know, and some of the bosses, their bosses, didn't allow them to go to in Uruguay because it was, you know, because they had the pause of two months from work. So the biggest problem was for a guy named Emeric Vogel. He was an ethnic German from the Western Romania, and Luchide and other guys who organized the team went to his boss, and with big pressures he was allowed to go to Uruguay. So finally they went to Genoa, and we have a lot of interesting stories from Conte Verde, because they had the trip was very long, I think 2 weeks or something like that, 2 weeks. And the most interesting story is with a guy named Ladislau Rafinski. He was from Timișoara, in the western part of the country. He then also played for Rapid, who was a very good team in that years. Very well-known team from Romania, Rapid. And the guys were training on the boat, and Rafinski took a very hard shot on the ball, and the ball went straight in the ocean. And Rafinski, who was a good swimmer, he wanted to go after the ball. And yeah. And his colleagues told him, you're a moron. This is the ocean, not Bega. Bega is the river which flows through Timișoara. Okay. So this is the ocean. This is not Bega. His name was Rudi Vetzer. And they took him photo shootings, let's say a day of the Romanian captain. Yes, and they also took him photos in the bed, or let's say washing his hands and all things like that. Yes, so it was the first time for a Romanian footballer to be treated like a star. He was treated like a world star. He's the captain of Romania, and they were writing that Romania was the first team from Europe that accepted to take part in this World Cup.
The trip from the Mediterranean and Europe. So the Conte Verde had first picked up the Romanian team I believe on the 20th or 21st, and they made their way to Villefranche-sur-Mer, and that's where they picked up Jules Rimet and the French team, as well as the coveted statue that was worth an estimated 50,000 francs, and made of solid gold, and was transported in a customized suitcase that was well hidden away from prying eyes. What I wanted to do is I wanted to get your point of view, Paul, on the composition of the team that was selected to come. How far or how close to the World Cup was the team selected? Did they have trials? Because it was very late that they decided to commit to heading to the World Cup, as many of the teams from Europe. So I look forward to hearing your perspective on the composition.
Thank you. First of all, Jules Rimet, the French president of the French FA and of the FIFA, had huge difficulties to convince the French officials to let the national team go to Montevideo. So the composition was the one of the best team possible of French players. Since, for instance, you had the French goalkeeper Alex Tepo, who was certainly the best at the moment. Some young and very good back like Etienne Matler, who made a very good career during the 13, or Alexandre Villaplane, the captain. So it was a good team, which was difficult to settle because some of them had some kind of job. It was a time of amateurism in France. So they need to have a job. So some of them, there was one who worked for the custom. So the French FA had to convince the custom administration to let him go. One was a young guy who was doing his military service. So it was, they called the French diplomacy, and so he was considered as a kind of a special envoyé to Montevideo. So it was difficult. So they didn't have a real training before going to Montevideo. So they consider that they should train as they could on the Conte Verde during 2 weeks, and then at the arrival in Montevideo. So it was more, and in the French press just before the departure, it was explained as not as a sport, really sport journey. It was more a diplomatic journey. The more important, and it's stressed in many papers, the more important was to send a team and not the result finally. So it was the first victory, and that's what the the Uruguayan ambassador at a dinner just before the departure to Villefranche-sur-Mer, he said that the French had scored the first goal, not because of the value of the team, but because the team was going to Montevideo.
And so we talk about the players who, the French players who made the journey, but what about some of the players who didn't because of problems between this famous amateurism and professionalism? As I understand, the brother of Lucien Laurent, I believe it was Jean Laurent, he did not go. He as a player, yeah.
Yes, because it was a time in which there was a huge debate within the French FA between the official who was for the professionalism, and it was pushed by the creation of FC Sochaux, the team of Peugeot, and the officials want to remain amateur, and so if you go to for a tour for at least 3 or 4 weeks, it means that you need to be reimbursed and you need to live. So you are not quite an amateur. And in fact, it was a debate that came from the debate on the Olympic Games and the problem between FIFA and IOC. So the team was kind of compromised, and compromise made by Jules Rimet, who was a very good negotiator and a good diplomat within his federation and within the FIFA.
Right. We had, if I can interfere, we had the same problem in Belgium with Raymond Breyne, the brother of Pierre Breyne, who did go to Montevideo. Raymond Breyne could be considered as one of the best Belgian players ever. He was, in fact, the Eden Hazard of the 1930s. And he was suspended by the Belgian FA because he owned a pub. And because due to owning a pub and gaining money from that, because of he's very known as a football player, the Belgian FA said, no, then indirectly, you win money, you gain money by your football status, although it is by opening a pub. So he was suspended, moved to Czechoslovakia, to Sparta Prague. And so Belgium, in fact, shot himself in the foot by not selecting or by suspending Raymond Breyne. And maybe with Raymond Breyne in the team, we could have or should have done much better than the Belgian team did in Montevideo.
If I can add something about the spirit of the team, when they took the train from Paris to Villefranche, during the day before the departure on the Conte Verde, the official lost the players, a part of the players, because the players went to the beach to have a bath. And it shows the spirit of the journey. It was more for this guy who maybe had never traveled outside Europe. It was for them first a kind of big journey of tourism, of discovery, and more in a way some vacations, paid vacations, than participation to a world tournament.
We didn't lose any players on the way with the train from Paris to Barcelona, but we did lose our luggage. So when they had to change trains in Paris, they didn't see the luggage and they were searching and searching. And then one guy who was the president, he said, okay, I will stay here and take care of the left luggage. And then when the train moved, left the train station, then on the other platform he saw 54 bags waiting, so they were not on the train. Then he took several trains, several stop trains before reaching Barcelona. I think he was 2 days on the way, and it was very hot. And every station where they stopped, he had to move all the luggage himself. And even at the port in Barcelona, when he arrived, there was some trouble with luggages. So yeah, that was really a Calvary, let's say. So we didn't lose any players on the way to Barcelona, but we did lose, and we got it back afterwards, the luggage. It's a sign of how travelings were organized those days.
Now, on the Conte Verde, there were different levels, and from what I've understood, in terms of training, periods of training, there was always a lottery. Every day there was a lottery of who was going to be able to train at what moments, and I think that's it's very interesting to see that there was enough space for them to really do jogging, calisthenics, gymnastics. And that was a very big part of the philosophy, of just the idea of sport and physical activity in, from the late 1890s and through the 10s and 20s and culminating with the 30s.
Kicking a ball on the deck would be dangerous because every ball over the deck was a lost ball. was the lottery to decide on the training hours? Was it daily, or was it just once and then it remained? Because what I read and heard and wrote also is that the Belgian sides have been drawn to train at 6 a.m. So, and I think they always had to train at 6 a.m. So, because they always had training at 6 a.m. and they were served their breakfast the last. And that on one occasion, it made the coach so angry that he pulled his table and he had to wait, because he had to wait that long. And there are two versions: or he smashed on the table and all the coffee was spoiled, or when he saw another plate with omelets passing by where he thought it was for the Belgian side. So, or he pulled over the table, being so angry, and then he had been called into the captain's office and he had to apologize for his behavior. So, but from then on, the Belgians received their breakfast on time.
Back to the point of gymnastics, I think it was not so difficult for the players because they were born in a body culture in which gymnastics was essential. They came, for the French case, they came from a rather popular or middle class background. And so they came in general, to the French school, the primary school, in which there was no sport. It was mainly gymnastics. And so I think they came back to this body culture of their youth. So it was not so difficult exotic for them.
Okay, training is one thing. But one thing that I realized during the US trip is that there were cliques and clans, groups, small groups that would form. Because in all of the collections that I've been able to discover, 3 major photo album collections, there's inherently a clan, and you always see these 3 or 4 players together, and that was actually one of the problems, because my grandfather, being the youngest on the team at 21 years old, he was the Benjamin, the young one. Mm-hmm. And so he could be quite shy, so he would keep to himself, and so he was in photo groups, because a lot of them were much, mid 20s, at the very most, beginning of their 30s, you see. So I find those cliques to have been, and maybe those cliques were formed because of the fact that they played together on the same team.
It comes along with the results, but in those days, I can imagine people arriving in a completely new world, far away from home, after a 2-week trip on a boat, homesick, seasick, landsick, whatever you can call it. It must have been dreadful for some of them. So, and then also, it's you need to be a good psychologist to keep your team together and preparing them, to perform.
The Romanian team arrived on the Conte Verde in Villefranche. They suffered already from seasickness from Genoa to Villefranche. So the rest of the journey had to be a bit difficult for them.
Yeah, many players suffer not only from seasickness but also land sickness. That means that after being for 2 weeks on a boat on the ocean, you arrive in land and your brain is not in the right combination with your muscles. So it gives you, well, they say it's giving you a very dreadful feeling, and that is called land illness in Flemish. So they suffered from land illness. They suffered from overweight because the food on the Conte Verde was far too good and too plenty. There was too much to eat. And they did have 3 meals a day, and meals means
Teams would dedicate the time, the desire to fulfill this, to help make this first World Cup. Luckily, you had Enrique Buero Sr., the Uruguayan diplomat, to Belgium,
Yeah.
who was really working behind the scenes to make this not just an America's Cup, because that's what it would have been.
Yeah.
If Enrique and subsequently Jules Rimet didn't push in a country that is so far away and so small.
Enrique Buero was sent to Belgium to convince Belgium. At first, I think Belgium was the first country that was that subscribed, let's say. Jules Rimet said, yeah, if Belgium goes, we have to go too. And then they had two more others, so Yugoslavia and Romania. And then they took off. I think Romania was even, players have been paid by their king. Those who had to leave their job. So the king paid their wages. That's what I've been reading the past years.
Thank you so much. All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Have a nice day. Bye.
All right, you too.
Would be very happy to participate.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Have a good day.